As I look back on my own flying career, I often think about some of the quotes I've heard along the way, like aviate, navigate, communicate, or monitor the freq before you speak. Shout out to one of my all-time professors, Mitch Grunman, who's unfortunately no longer with us on that one. But how about speed is life, altitude is insurance? And I'll never be able to not hear Martha King say, please, stay out of the trees, at the end of every Great King video. But there's one quote that just keeps coming up time and time again. It's written on the walls of flight schools, it's seen on plaques and awards, it's quoted in films, and it's used in just about every piece of Learn to Fly marketing material I've really ever seen. And that's because it's just so beautiful, so expressive of the sentiment we all feel when aviation's running through our veins, and it was spoken by one of the all-time great artists, scientists, and thinkers of the last 1,000 years. Are you ready? Get back to my voiceover days here. For once you've tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. For there you've been, and there you will always long to return. Leonardo DaVinci. There's just one problem, though. He never said that. Welcome to Podcasting on a Plane. I'm Brandon Gonzalez, your host, as we either enlighten you or maybe just ruin a beautiful myth about flying it all at the same time. Sorry. But we're broadcasting, as always, from the tower at mythical yet oh so real West Coast Delta, and this is a podcast where we talk about the backstories behind all that we do in Air World, and maybe all that we hear about it too, and particularly those historical gems that carry the most basic wisdom down through generations. Rich Pickett said it a few episodes back, and Rob and I have talked about it all the time. And it's that stories are how we communicate the best information. It's distilled down to its most important parts and then made interesting enough that people actually listen. And then it's passed down. And today on the show, I've got a master at cataloging all of those famous quotes you hear, from the oldies but goodies right up to the best current ones too. Like here's an example, the newest one on his site. Somebody said, "I'll put this plane down in the middle of Kansas and dump people off. I don't care. So behave." And that was spoken by an exasperated American Airlines pilot on the PA on a flight from DCA to Phoenix with a non-compliant Trump fans yelling USA, USA in the back. That was reported in the New Post on January 8th. Our guest today's name is Dave English, which couldn't be any more fitting really given both his work and, well, you'll hear the other reason. But I just can't wait to get down to business on this, to tell you actually said that famous line, and I hope that by the end you'll have a few new gems in your aviation vocabulary too. Well, anyway, I'm really excited to do this. So first off, Dave, welcome to the show. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Brandon. Thank you for asking.
Of course. So Dave English with a name like that, where are you from?
It amuses people, and I understand. I really am English. Grew up just outside of London, England. Been here in the States since I was 20, though, so that's over 30 years.
Yeah, I think the last time I went to London, I was just a little more than 20. So why did you come here?
I met American women in college. Been here ever since.
What better reason is there? I love it. What about the aviation part of it? That's probably the more important part. I mean, did you find aviation or did aviation find you?
It found me as a kid. My dad took me to air shows. He drove me out to Heathrow Airport just to watch airplanes take off and land. And as a kid, I always thought that's what I wanted to do. Now, I didn't really move on that. And in fact, at end of high school, had an opportunity to move forward with a RAF scholarship for college. But I'd heard that college, you go to college, you expand your horizons and you meet new things and new people and you grow. So I thought I was doing the responsible adult thing and that I would grow out of that stupid childhood flying thing. So I didn't do that. I didn't do the RAF, and I went to college, and then I came to the States, and then I realized I still wanted to do what sort of seemed that childish thing of being a pilot. You know, it seemed like it's like being a firefighter. Or my 6-year-old, I asked him, or somebody else asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "Well, either a dentist," I don't know where he got that from, or the Incredible Hulk. So one or the other. And I sort of viewed flying that way, but I didn't grow out of it. So then I went to a regular commercial flight school and started flying traffic watch and flying smaller planes and instructing, and a long time at a commuter or regional airline.
And you're doing all that here in the U.S.?
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'd moved to the US at that point and then joined a major airline 17 years ago. And now I just fly the Airbus, and life is pretty good.
Yeah. So now that you fly for airlines, is it everything you thought it would be?
It's a really good, comfortable life. I fly the Airbus, and I don't fly all around the world, but I fly to a lot of places, and I still really, really enjoy flying. And it's a great job because you're not selling something to people that maybe they don't want or they don't need, and you're helping people. You're transporting people for business or to see their grandkid for the first time or to go on a great vacation, and it's something you can feel good at all kinds of levels, and it pays pretty good for what I do.
Yeah. Do you think it pays better than being the Incredible Hulk?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know what the dental benefits either. So he's got a lot of factors to weigh on what career he wants to do, but who knows?
Sure. Well, so with all that experience, then you found it somewhere, you found the need to start cataloging fun quotes you came along the way?
Yeah, I was reading a lot about flying because that's cheap. That's pretty cool way to see a lot, and I would write down for myself. Oh, this is really good. Oh, I want to remember that, and that list became a little longer, and this was back in a world of America Online, right? AOL and CompuServe, the CompuServe forums. And I typed some of them up and put them on some of those AV forums. And then other people had lists, and we joined them together, and it grew that way. And it was something to do that you could do on this new internet thing. And I started a little website on CompuServe initially, and it grew, and it was popular, and then people were sending it in because no one person could sit and read and find all these on their own. And then it became something fun, something interesting to connect with other people and do on the internet.
Sure. Well, let's get into some of these fun quotes that you've started cataloging, and we all know probably the most, I like that you put it under the area called cliches, but aviate, navigate, communicate. That's probably the number one aviation quote of all time. Don't you think?
Yeah, probably. It's certainly short, sweet, easy to remember, and useful. It's some of the things that quotes are really good at, because it's a little pearl of wisdom that you can remember. So aviate, navigate, litigate. No.
There you go. All right. Well, but then there's a lot more interesting ones, and I'm going to read this one. This was one that stuck out of me. Regards to piloting, a check ride ought to be like a skirt, short enough to be interesting, but still be long enough to cover everything.
Yeah, lots of very short, funny quips, and then there's lots of other quotes that get into a lot deeper meanings of how powerful flying is and flying safely. And then you start wondering, well, where did they come from? Who said it first? So that starts to become the interest of getting it right and digging out the history. And yeah.
I like this one that I think maybe might resonate with the air traffic controllers out there. Lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine.
I had never thought about that from the controller point of view. Yeah, that's pretty good. I do have that list on there. It should still be on there of the top 10 from the old O'Hare Tracon.
Don't drop the aircraft in order to fly the microphone. That's another good one.
Yes, that comes back to the Aviate, Navigate, Communicate, and it's a great. I don't know who said that one, and a lot of the cliches and a lot of them you don't know where they started, but yeah, that's a great way, and that's something that it resonates. It turns a little light on in your head when you read it and go, oh yeah, I get it now, and you're less likely to forget it when you're flying and you feel the need to get on the radio and tell someone what's happening when actually dealing with it obviously would be a whole lot better.
Sure. And to that same line of thinking, there's actually one more I noticed here, and we'll depart the fix after this one on the communications. But an airplane flies because of a principle discovered by Bernoulli, not Marconi. Maybe we should do a little history lesson on this one with our communication quotes.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I think that's just more a play on the words because it sounds good, and that it's aerodynamics and not talking on the radio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and I think that Chuck Yeager in one of his interviews has a line talking about that television and movies have it all wrong. I think he uses the word bullshit, that describing a pilot in trouble, a test pilot high above Edwards, and he's spinning and he's inverted and all the red lights are going on, and he's talking on the radio. And he says, no, he's not. He's not. He's working the problem. He's figuring out what he has to do. He's not talking on the radio. Yeah, I don't think there was a good quote out of that, but that's something I remember him talking about, and it comes back to those little lines of aviate, navigate, communicate.
Sure. Well, one of the things I like that you do on your website here is there's a lot of them that have to do with the business of aviation, not just the flying itself. And this was kind of my thing back in college, studying how airlines were founded and how they were led and the ones that went away, things like that. But let's read a couple from there. This one's a little bit longer, but it's from the Jet Set, The People, the Planes, the Glamour, and the Romance in Aviation's Glory Years from 2014. It says, the passenger jet was and still is one of the wonders of the world, a world whose other wonders the jet made accessible. Along with the personal computer, it ranks as the greatest technological innovation of the second half of the 20th century. The computer turned your lowly desk into a cross between Harvard and Hollywood. The jet turned you into an adventurer. It freed you from the shackles of that desk and set you free to roam the world, to become a Lindbergh, an Earhart, a James Bond, and if you had enough money and time, a jet setter. I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's part of the magic and the wonder of flying. That's part of flying or aviation that touches people that aren't just pilots or mechanics or controllers, that it is connecting the world. It does bring people together. It does show you the world we live on from a completely different perspective. And clearly there's hundreds of people have thought about this and expressed it a whole lot more eloquently than I can. And reading it is still magic, still going through them and looking at them is like, oh yeah, oh wow. And the Aviation Quote Collection, it's been used by other people in books and movies, and I helped work on a movie several years ago, aviation documentary, and we looked for a quote that a mile of road goes a mile, but a mile of runway takes you anywhere in the world. And it's a great line, and I hadn't found out who said it originally or where it came from, and neither could the fact checkers and the researchers find it. So there's a quote that is still unknown. It's a mystery. If anyone who's listening knows where it came from, write in and let us know, because it is kind of odd that there's some lines that are so good, but we don't know where it came from.
Now, on running the airline business, the book that probably changed my life was that book, Hard Landing, because that was really what opened my eyes into the way that so many of the largest airlines had started. And then I got into all the Bob Serling books on the histories that he wrote of all the major carriers. But one of the great quotes from one of the men who ran Pan Am in the New York Times, August 28th, 1981, was, "Once you get hooked on the airline business, it's worse than dope. It's awful hard to get out. It's got everything you'd want for excitement, a capital-intensive, labor-intensive, around-the-clock service business, and it calls on all your skills as an executive." So I think aviation tends to hook pilots and mechanics and controllers and so on, but it also can hook business people in the same way, huh?
Yes, and some of the great airline CEOs have clearly been fascinated by the airline business, by the industry, and some of the great designers of aircraft have obviously that they're not just in it for the money or the dental benefits or the career progression, and it's fun to read about that and to see that, and it's still current. I mean, David Neilman has started 3 or 4 airlines, and they've all done fantastic. And he clearly loves the complexity of airlines. You know, making a movie involves so many people, teams of people doing completely different skill sets. Well, airlines come pretty close, and getting everybody to work together in a team is it's pretty. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the words, which is maybe why I collect other people's quotes and read them again.
Sure. Well, that quote was from Ed Acker. And then actually, here's another one from the same interview. It says, "I was thinking about finding a more challenging job, and I asked about being the captain of the Titanic, but they said I was years too late. So I decided to take the job of Pan Am chairman."
Yeah, that Pan Am, clearly that's a pretty sad story, that something that was so fantastic could sort of peter out. Sometimes used by other airline executives now as, hey, when I remember the chief pilot in American Airlines years ago, when American was doing fantastic, left a message to all the pilots saying, when I was trying to get hired, the big airlines was Pan Am and TWA and Eastern, and where are they now? So reading these quotes is a good history lesson and a good check on what is happening now.
Yeah. Well, all these quotes are great, and you can go to aviationquotations.com and have a look at so many more. But there's one quote, and it's probably the most famous quote of all time. More famous than the mile of runway 1, more famous than, well, maybe not more famous than Aviate, Navigate, Communicate, but probably a close second. And back when I sold Cessnas, this was used in every piece of marketing material I think we had at the time. "For once you have tasted flight, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will always long to return." Leonardo da Vinci. Or was it?
No, it wasn't. But it's everywhere. I mean, it is absolutely everywhere because it sounds so right. It somehow touches us. It's emotional, and it's universal, and the phrasing and the pacing sounds so right. And when I was reading lots of aviation books in the 80s, it was in a few of them, including what seemed like definitive tomes. It's been reprinted in some Smithsonian publications and the Washington Post. And when I was working on the quote book, I was finding the original sources. And doing this back in the 90s was hard because there was no Google, there was no scans of old books and digitalized copies. So I was going to the university library and using card indexes and searching through books and looking at their citations and references and then trying to find that book. And I couldn't find where that line was that Leonardo had written it. And of course, part of the problem is he wrote in very bad, apparently, Latin or Italian, and he wrote backwards, and he didn't really write books. He had notebooks. He had laboratory notebooks and idea notebooks, and they're some of the most important publications in the history of the world. And I couldn't sit down and read them. I'm not an expert in reading Latin backwards. But where was it? What book was it in? And you couldn't find it. But hey, it's everywhere, so it's on the list, and people loved it, and so it moved up on the list. And it bugged me that what is it in this codex? Is it on this page? Where is it? And you couldn't find it, and you wouldn't worry about it. And then 5-10 years later, you'd see it on somewhere in some other book or on a T-shirt or whatever. Well, where is that? Let me go look at that again. And as Google expanded and Google Books and people digitized tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of old books, you could start to work your way back and see it, but you just couldn't find it past like 50 something years ago. And then I wouldn't worry about it. And then there have been true journalists or academics that research these things, and they couldn't find it either. And eventually a group on the internet, on Wiki Quote, were writing about it, and we found out that no, it wasn't Leonardo at all. It was a wonderful American, a TV writer, a documentary producer, and he was working on a documentary about Leonardo, which is a great documentary, and it was as accurate as they could make it, but they had a voiceover that said almost that line, and it wasn't clear that this wasn't an exact quote. It wasn't clear that this was more a condensation or a distillation of what he felt and did write about. And a couple of people watched that TV documentary in, I think, 1966, and they wrote it down and they liked it, and then it got quoted at the start of a magazine article, and more people read that magazine article, and then it got used in a book, and then that book became popular with hang glider pilots and skydivers in California in the late 70s. And they started quoting it and writing it down, and then from there it made it into aviation magazines and aviation books, and now it's everywhere on Instagram and whatnot. I don't even know how to stop it, I just sometimes want to scream, no, it's a great line, but it wasn't Leonardo. Sorry. It was American TV writer in 1965, John Secondary.
Boom.
Yeah.
So let's talk about him. Where did this guy come from?
He was born in Italy, and when he was a kid, his family emigrated to the United States. And in fact, I think he was held up in Ellis Island for a short time because they were excess to quota. And the more I read about him, the more you're like, this is a really, really cool guy. He was in the Second World War. He commanded a tank company in Italy. And he wrote romantic novels. He wrote a book that the film rights were made into a film, and Frank Sinatra sang the song from the movie. That song won an Oscar, and he moved into documentaries, not just writing them but making them. I think he ran the CBS documentary division in the 70s, where he won a whole bunch of Peabody Awards and Emmys, and worked with Disney. He was interested in aviation and space, and the line from that document, from that voiceover, it was a common technique that they used of having voiceovers and dramatic recreations to distill the idea of a time.
So this guy, although maybe not the next Da Vinci, he was a bit of a Renaissance man himself, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, I mean a cool cat, someone who had commanded a tank, who had written romantic novels. He worked for the government after the Second World War.
Sure. Well, it sounds like, this guy's style of making documentaries and films, you write in your article, that they were heavy in visualization and dramatic voiceover narration. And then going down a little bit further, one of the episodes of the saga of Western Man was Leonardo da Vinci. And the part of Leonardo da Vinci, or the voice, was played by a man named Frederick March. And this was 1965, it was released in 1966. Mm-hmm. So perhaps that style and that dramatic way of making these documentaries was how that wonderful quote that they wrote was sort of burned into our collective memory because it was just done so well.
Yeah, it didn't explode from that one documentary, but some people saw it and wrote it down, and it became repeated and used in a book and in a magazine article, and like a fire that starts with one little match, and then that goes to the little bit of newspaper, and that catches a light, and it sort of burns for a little bit, and then it gets to another piece of kindling. And over 10 years or so, it slowly grew and was repeated. And then in maybe the 80s or the 90s, it exploded. And now with the internet and copy and paste and Instagram, it's just everywhere you look. And since the article was published on Airfax, I've had people writing me, telling me, I saw it on this, I saw it on that. A Delta pilot who just retired, Delta Flight Ops, gave him something with the quote on it. And he laughed that he had just read the article a few weeks prior.
Wow. I just think I can't help but just keep coming back to this idea that these documentaries were made in such a powerful style that a voice actor playing Leonardo da Vinci was able to basically get everyone to believe that Leonardo da Vinci actually had said that. I mean, that truly is some of the best acting, I guess, we could possibly come up with.
Right. And no doubt people with more philosophical bents or better understandings could take this story that for me is a super cool aviation quote story of a line we all love and resonates with us. What other things are out there that was made up, and it was made up with the best of intentions, and what other things get repeated so many times, and once it was repeated sort of it didn't say attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. Right from the get-go, it was used in a science fiction book at the start of the book or the start of a chapter. It was assigned to Leonardo da Vinci. Oh, well, I think that's authoritative. I'll quote it because it's important. What other things get repeated so many times that people don't question it and that aren't true?
Well, I guess we can now lay claim to the fact that, folks, you heard it here last. He didn't say it. But here's a quote. Right. Here's a quote he did say. And before we go, I think that maybe we should have another Da Vinci quote that actually is verifiable, authentic, and inspirational as well. A bird is an instrument working according to mathematical law, and it's in the capacity of man to reproduce such an instrument. A man with wings large enough and duly attached might learn to overcome the resistance of the air and raise himself upon it. And Da Vinci did, in fact, say that.
Yes, I checked that 6 ways backwards and forwards before putting it in.
Well, this article we keep referencing is in Airfax. It was published August 11th of just last year, 2020. And it was, of course, written by Dave English. It's one of the very most popular articles on Airfax Journal. It's pretty easy to find, but if not, there will be, of course, a link in the show notes. So, Dave English, I don't know if I feel better or worse now. Maybe you ruined my favorite quote, or maybe you've given me more insight than I could ever ask for. I'm not sure where I should be.
Oh, yeah, I've now shared the one little fact that annoys me, that you see it and you want to scream. I was in California last year, and it was on the whole wall of a flight school when you walked in, and you just want to yell and scream, or you just want to say, that's not correct. But I don't want to be that guy. I just wanted to rent a plane and fly with someone I hadn't flown with before and go do something kind of fun. I didn't want to be that guy. So I guess maybe it's passive aggressive. Write an article and hope it explodes on the internet that he didn't write it. It's a great line, and I feel the same way, but it wasn't Leonardo. Sorry.
If we want to hear more of your musings, where can we find you?
At daveenglish.com, or my more personal thoughts on flying and aviating and airmanship, www.innerairmanship.com.
Well, there you have it. I hope your life isn't ruined. I'm just kidding. But you may have some thoughts on what you've heard today, and if so, you know what to do. Send your thoughts to Brandon at podcastingonaplane.com and let me know what you think. You can use your smartphone or the SpeakPipe widget that pops up when you visit podcastingonaplane.com to record me something, and who knows, maybe it'll even end up on the show. And while you're on the website, maybe consider supporting the show financially too. If you have the means and you find value in it, I would really appreciate having you on board as a monthly patron. You get episodes early and some other fun stuff too. But if you're not in the recurring thing, that's cool. There's a PayPal link there for whatever you feel is right. And if you want to stay sharp on the mic, make sure to use the affiliate code DELTA at plainenglishsim.com to get you 10% off the best smartphone-based ATC radio comm simulator around. And you can swipe up for the link in the show notes. As always, I thank you so much for your support, whatever form it takes, and for listening to the show and passing the word along about this or any aviation podcast to a friend. And that's all for now. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day.
The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. Brandon's comments and those of his guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc., are not part of his official responsibility as a controller or as an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are his, and those of his guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. Also, while he's a CFI, he's not acting as your CFI, nor is he your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice or legal counsel. If you're in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.